And good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. We have breaking news, a direct challenge to President Trump's authority and the travel ban he imposed Friday night. It's coming from his own Department of Justice, headed for the moment by an Obama appointee, and it's far from the only headline tonight. There's the human cost, the resistance to the order from protesters around the country and the world. Those are live pictures you're seeing there of protesters in Columbus, Ohio. And now former President Obama making his first policy statement since leaving office. We'll bring all of that to you ahead. Also, the support for what President Trump did from everyday Americans who said they feel safer now. A lot to cover in the next 2 hours, starting, though, with the acting attorney general's act of defiance. CNN Evan Perez joins us with the latest. So an executive order from the acting attorney general to the Justice Department. What are the details?
Well, Anderson, this is an extraordinary order from the acting attorney general, Sally Yates. She's ordering the Justice Department lawyers not to defend this executive order that the new president, Donald Trump, issued on Friday with regard to refugees and immigration. She says in her order to the Justice Department lawyers that she does not believe that this order is lawful. That's a big deal for the government because now they're facing challenges in at least 5 jurisdictions, 5 states right now, Anderson, where judges are hearing challenges to whether or not this law, this executive order from the president is legal. And what she said, and I'll read you a little piece of what she said in her order. She says, I am responsible for ensuring that the positions we take in court remain consistent with this institution's solemn obligation to always seek justice and stand for what is right. At present, I am not convinced that the defense of the executive order is consistent with these responsibilities, nor am I convinced that the executive order is lawful. So, Anderson, what happens next? We don't know. The president has the right to fire the acting attorney general, but then she is really the only one left inside the Justice Department who's Senate confirmed and who could sign off on surveillance warrants, international surveillance warrants, and that's a big deal for the government.
So her statement was really only in effect to the effect that it's in effect. It's only in effect until the acting attorney general leaves office, wherein
Right.
Jeff Sessions will then be sworn in.
Right. The assumption has been that Jeff Sessions was going to be confirmed as Attorney General later this week. We don't know whether or not that changes. If this, we know that, for instance, some of the Republicans on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, have been uncomfortable with some parts of this executive order, especially because it wasn't briefed to them before the president signed it. A lot of people did not see this, including Sally Yates, and she struggled with this over the weekend, Anderson. That's what I'm told by sources at the Justice Department. And so finally today she issued this order to the Justice Department lawyers that they were not going to defend this, at least until the new Attorney General takes office.
All right, Evan Perez, thanks very much. We should point out President Trump just tweeted, and I quote, "The Democrats are delaying my cabinet picks for purely political reasons. They have nothing going but to obstruct, now have an Obama AG." Let's bring in some legal expertise. Joining us is CNN legal analyst Laura Coates, a former federal prosecutor, also constitutional attorney Paige Pate, and Harvard's Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, what do you make of the acting attorney general's decision, and how does this actually play out?
Well, she's a terrific public servant with a great reputation, but she's made a serious mistake here. She's responded to politics with politics. It's so easy for somebody who is the outgoing acting attorney general to stand up and be a hero against the elected president. This is a very difficult, nuanced question. Some of the executive order is probably unconstitutional as it applies to green card holders. Some of it may be in violation of the statute that prohibits visas from being denied on religious grounds. Some of it may be constitutional as it applies to people who haven't ever been in the country and are trying to visit. What was needed was a nuanced, calibrated, legal approach instead of a kind of knee-jerk statement, I'm not going to enforce it at all. The president has the right to have a lawyer defend his actions in court. And if she won't do it, the courts will probably appoint somebody else to do it. So I think it's a little bit of politics versus politics. She could have done a much, much better job if she had responded to The very, very badly crafted order, something I disagree, the executive order I fundamentally disagree with, but if she had responded to it in a more lawyer-like, careful, nuanced way, she would have had a bigger impact. I think she played into the hands of Donald Trump by doing what she did.
So, Professor Dershowitz, what are Donald Trump's options here? I mean, the Justice Department does ultimately answer to him. It's part of the executive branch.
Well, I think it would be a mistake for him to fire her. That would play, again, the political card. I think what he should do is arrange to have another lawyer defend the actions. I heard earlier that maybe the legal counsel's office of the Justice Department might have had a somewhat different view of this. I think that he should respond, if he's smart, he should respond in a more nuanced way than she responded and take the high ground. It's hard because this is such a bad policy implemented in such a terrible way, but we shouldn't confuse a bad policy with either an unconstitutional policy or an unlawful policy. Something can be very bad and still be legal. And it's not the job of the Justice Department to do, to quote Sally Yates, what is right. It's to do what is lawful. That's her job, not to do what is right.
Laura, when the Attorney General, in this case the acting Attorney General, gives a directive like this, are all federal prosecutors bound to follow it, full stop, or is there wiggle room? Can they make up their own minds?
Well, they are bound to follow her. She is essentially their commander-in-chief. But I have to say, I disagree to an extent here with Mr. Dershowitz, what she's saying, because remember, the Justice Department does have a role, and that is also to preserve the credibility of the government in making any arguments in front of the courts. And one of the responsibilities of the DOJ is to ensure that it has that credibility going forward and that they have the backing to be able to say, to walk into any court, that what they're defending and what they're actively trying to enforce is a lawful, a completely lawful act. And here, I think what she's doing is not just making a political statement. What she's doing is saying, because of the ambiguity in this executive order, and because there are portions of it at least that may defy not only the Constitution, perhaps the Establishment Clause, perhaps the ability not to discriminate against people for national origin, we cannot make a straight-faced argument in totality in a way that preserves the DOJ's credibility going forward.
But Paige,
it's a smart decision.
Oh, sorry, but don't lawyers all the time make arguments based on what their clients believe, not necessarily what their personal beliefs are? Isn't that how the legal system works?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, that is the pessimistic view, of course, Anderson, of what lawyers do. But it's true, they do make arguments, but they have to be grounded in the law. And remember, one of the issues with this particular executive order is not just the morality portion. Forget the morality portion for a second. Legally speaking, there's not clear guidance going forward on how to actually enforce the law and whether or not what they're enforcing is consistent with other objectives. And namely, civil rights organizations have talked about this, that we have a responsibility as DOJ attorneys not just to enforce blindly things that are unconstitutional, or maybe there is a responsibility that is higher than just trying to appease the client. And remember, the president is not the client of DOJ, the people are.
Paige, I understand you knew the acting Attorney General when she was a U.S. Attorney in Atlanta. What can you tell us about her?
I've known her for a long time, and the first thing that you need to know about Sally Yates is that she is not political. She's been a career prosecutor for decades. She was an assistant United States attorney here in Atlanta. She became the #2 in this office under both Republican and Democratic United States attorneys, and then she became Deputy Attorney General in Washington. She has never made decisions based on politics. She makes decisions based on what she believes is right and inconsistent with the best policies of the Department of Justice. Now, I believe that this is something where we need some nuance, but nuance should have come before the executive order was ever issued. And at this point, I'm sorry?
I agree, but she can't respond to lack of nuance with lack of nuance. You don't
fight
fire
but it's her responsibility as head of the Justice Department at this point to say, I should have reviewed this. It should have gone in front of lawyers who are not just concerned with the letters that are in the executive order, but what's being said around it, the context, and more importantly, how it's being implemented. I think she sees a very serious constitutional problem, and it's her obligation to say something because nobody else in that administration is.
Professor Dershowitz,
but I think that's right.
How unusual is this? How uncharted waters are we in here?
Well, it's very unusual. Usually when somebody refuses to enforce the orders of the president, it involves a very, very clear case of unconstitutionality, unlawfulness. She's wrong when she says it's the job of the Justice Department to make sure that what is happening is right, or I think also your other guest is wrong, to preserve the integrity of the Justice Department and their credibility before the courts. That may be what they would like to see happen, but her job is to enforce the law unless it is clearly unconstitutional or clearly in violation of a statute. And this law doesn't satisfy that very hard criteria in all its respects. There may be parts of it that are constitutional. Let me give you an example. If you have people who are in Yemen, they've never been in the United States, they want to come here, the president has plenary authority to deny them. We have a long history, a tragic history, but a long history of denying people the ability to come to this country on political grounds. We don't like their ideology. We kept them out if they were communists. That happens to be the law and the precedents. I wish that would change, but it's not the job of the Attorney General to refuse to enforce a law based on her personal views that it's bad policy. She can
Alan,
resign.
this is not a normal
but
law.
I think
This is an executive order signed by the president that was not reviewed by the top level at the Justice Department. And it's not just what's in that order, it's the process. And I think she has an obligation to make sure the process is followed. And it clearly was not in this case.
The Justice Department is not motivated by ego, Mr. Dershowitz. Their credibility they're trying to maintain is a consistency of constitutionality throughout the land. And for the reasons you just stated, that there are portions of it that can be parsed out as unconstitutional, they can't very well enforce the piecemeal version that you'd like them to do so. They have to enforce in totality.
They
do not,
no,
sir.
that's just wrong. They do it all the time.
They do not.
You have executive orders. You have that's just wrong. You have executive orders, and the courts enforce part of them and don't enforce others of them. They're severable, and the laws generally are written in ways that are severable. That's very common.
Let's leave it with the professor here for now. Paige Pate, thank you. Laura Coates as well. Professor Alan Dershowitz. Always want to bring in the panel. The Daily Beast, Matt Lewis, former Michigan governor, Democrat Jennifer Granholm, CNN political director David Chalian, also Trump supporter, American Spectator contributing editor Jeffrey Lord, New Yorker, Washington reporter Ryan Lizza, and Democratic strategist Hillary Rosen. We've been waiting for Donald Trump's response. We just want to put that up again. The Democrats are delaying my cabinet picks for purely political reasons. They have nothing going but to obstruct. Now have an Obama AG. I guess Donald Trump could just outright fire her, yes?
Certainly he could, although it does have this problem that you just heard Evan Perez discuss, which is that she may be the only person who can approve these foreign intelligence surveillance orders to acquire foreign intelligence. But Anderson, what is astonishing to watch, including tonight and watching how Donald Trump is going to react, from the very beginning, it didn't have to go this way. Apart from the policy, the implementation of what went on here, he probably could have accomplished the same goals without the blowback if it wasn't sort of the not ready for primetime players putting this together. But that's not the case.
But I'm not confident that this is just incompetence. I think this might be, this is me being a little sinister here, but they like controversy. They want to fight. And let's just game out what could happen. Donald Trump, they like disruption, right? Disruption is a good thing for them. Let's say Donald Trump does fire the acting.
Disruption and chaos.
Let's say Donald Trump fires the acting attorney general, right? So now all of a sudden we can't get orders signed. That expedites Sessions' confirmation for attorney general. But Democrats won't go along with it, right? They filibuster it. Now Mitch McConnell has a perfect excuse to invoke the nuclear option because it's a matter of national security. Now, this is a weird, crazy theory, but I'm telling you how I think they think.
Ryan, go ahead.
You cannot filibuster nominees anymore. The nuclear option's already been, that's already happened.
Okay, I'm sorry, for the Supreme Court you can, but not for, okay.
But
My point is it would expedite
I do agree with Matt, though, that this is now going to be the Sessions nomination will now be a referendum on the executive order. So I think there are a few Democrats who have said that they will vote for Sessions. There's going to be a lot of pressure on every Democrat to withdraw that support and any other actions they can take to slow down Sessions' nomination.
Jeffrey, could this have been avoided if, some more lawyers were consulted, or some lawyers were consulted, or the head of Homeland Security was consulted, or that it went through a little bit more rigorous screening?
Possibly. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not certainly going to play one on TV, But here's the problem, and Anderson, by chance, I have a column coming out of the Conservative Review discussing this before I knew about this. What we've got here, Think about the Badlands Park people defying the president. Think about the Energy Department.
By the way, that, according, was a former employee who had access to Twitter account,
okay.
who then was...
Okay. All right, but
That's why
there's
took it
other
down.
examples. The Energy Department refusing to turn over names. The Secret Service agent who said, I'm not going to take a bullet for him. And today, we have this idea from the Washington Post about State Department employees saying that they've got a dissent channel and all this. What we've got here is a bureaucracy that over decades, and under Republicans, under presidents of both parties, have mushroomed here to the point where they think they're here forever. The president comes and goes,
but
they have the freedom to do that. She is but the lady.
I get your point, but is that really what's going on here?
No,
or is it not enough people were actually consulted who actually should have been?
Turns out, you know what, being president is a really complicated thing, and you have to rely on the experts in making your steps, because you have no idea, as a business guy coming in who's negotiated property deals, that this is going to be analogous experience to running an entire government, which is the most powerful position in the world and has consequences across the globe. So now we have the whole Muslim world up in arms. We have Iraq taking action against us. We have our greatest allies, including England and including Germany, coming back at us. We've pissed off, Mexico. We've got the civil servants who rightly believe that they have been serving our nation, and all of a sudden they're being asked to do what they believe are wrongful acts. We've got the business community. Let me just finish. We've got the business community up in arms. We have the faith community, who 2,000 faith leaders write a letter to Congress. The whole thing is caving in. And turns out you could have done this better if you had been a better manager.
Yes, but that's what my point is. I know this is crazy, but the Steve Bannon, I'm not convinced that this is incompetence or mismanagement, right? And let me give you an example.
Well, if
right,
it's
just
not,
today,
he should be impeached.
This is flooding the zone. Just today, Donald Trump signed an executive order that nobody's talking about that basically changes everything about regulations. They're going to try to, for every one new regulation that passes, they will repeal 2 regulations. This could have big impact on things like EPA regulations.
I think he was trying to bury that, though?
Well, are we talking about it? I'm just saying they're flooding the zone.
I think he was trying to change the subject.
Let's hold this thought. We're going to continue the conversation in a moment.